Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me your ears. Today, I want to talk about numbers. Basic numbers, calculations, metrics that every salesperson should know when talking to a client about money and how it will impact them after they buy your product or your service. So I'm going to talk about 3 key numbers / metrics that you'll need to know how to calculate to really be able to position the value of your product or service. The first one, you know which one it is. It's probably return on investment. Very common. Now, how do you calculate return on investment? First, let's begin with the definition. Return on investment means if I invest a certain amount of money, how much money am I going to get back? If this is the cost, what's going to be my profit? So if you take profit minus cost, that would give you net profit. Profit minus cost will give you net profit. And if you divide that by the initial cost, your investment, and multiply it by 100, you'll get a percentage. That's how you calculate return on investment. It's that simple. A good memory tool to think about is net profit over cost. And net profit is simply, again, how much profit did I make and subtracting out the actual investment. So profit minus cost divided by cost gives you return on investment. Now, that's the first one. That basically tells the customer, here's how much you're going to get back in terms of interest on your money. Number 2, this one is more temporal, time-wise. It's called the break-even point. Clients want to know, well, how fast am I going to get my initial investment back? If I invest $10,000, how fast will I get that back? So here's how you do it. You take, again, the fixed cost, okay, the investment, right? And then what you do is you take the selling price minus the variable cost. Well, I know that gets a little technical right there. A variable cost, and actually calculate the break-even point. Let me break it down because it's not that hard. Now, let's say that you invested $10,000. That's my investment, $10,000. Now, I created a product that I'm going to sell for $1,000. And my variable cost is $500. Let me say it again. I invested $10,000. I'm going to sell this product at $1,000, and my cost to produce that product is $500. So if I take $10,000 divided by sales price minus the cost, which is $500, $1,000 minus $500, that means in order for me to get my money back, my $10,000, I have to sell 20 units or 20 products. That's all. That tells me immediately that if I invest $10,000 and I sell it at $1,000, and I still have some costs, right? And that's $500. So my profit per sale is $500. That's the best way of looking at it. If I sell a product for $1,000 minus $500, which is my cost, that's my net profit. So if I invested $10,000 and I divide it by my net profit, it'll tell me how many units, how many packages I have to sell to get my money back. The third one, this one's a tricky one. Tricky in the sense that this one's really hard to calculate and it requires you really talking to the client. Total cost of ownership. Most people think when they buy something, that's the cost. Let me give you a visual example so you know what I'm talking about. If you buy a house, let's say for $300,000, well, that's the cost. But what is the total cost of ownership? Well, the second question would be then, how long are you going to live in that house, right? That would be the second question. So let's say you say, I'm going to live here 5 years. Now, what we now have to do is estimate in those 5 years, what's it going to cost you to maintain that house? So for example, if your HVAC breaks down, your heater or your air conditioning, how much is that going to cost? If you need to repair a roof, do a new driveway, whatever it may be, these are added costs. And sometimes the client wants to know, I said, I know what the price is. I just want to know what the total cost of investment is, of ownership. If you're selling a software package, you'll say, look, the software package costs $50,000. The customer's going to say, yeah, that's the price, but what's the total cost of ownership? Here's where you have to kind of, tread lightly in explaining this, because if you buy a new software package, let's say you bought the software package, and let's just say it's $50,000, something simple. That's the price. That's the investment. But what's the real total cost? Well, now I have to train my salespeople on how to use this new software. Well, that's going to cost me some money. The fact that they're not going to be doing their jobs because they're in training, that's an opportunity cost. So there's a cost associated with that. Now, also, when I implement the new software, there might be some errors. So in other words, that's going to cost money to go back and repair. It might impact my customer service. So there's costs there also. In other words, there's the initial cost, there's some fixed costs like a maintenance plan or a maintenance program for upgrades, whatever it may be. And there's some variable costs that change over time, and opportunity costs. So one of the trickiest things to do with clients is to really sit down and agree on what we think the total cost of ownership is going to be. So many times when you're talking to a client, it's not the initial investment that they're worried about, the $50,000. They're more worried about what's it really going to cost? What's the total cost of ownership? And you have to be in a position where you can detail that information out and say, Mr. Customer, look, it's going to cost you $50,000. That's fact. Got that. But let's look at training. You have 20 people, you have to look at those costs, and we can estimate that's going to cost you about, $1,000 per person per day, and we estimate the number at this. Also, when we look at upgrades, annual upgrades, that's also included, and that will be at zero cost. And we have this over here, so forth and so on. You start describing this whole total cost of ownership, and that's what customers really want to know. So if you're talking to a client and you're trying to position value, you need to know what is the return on investment, because they're going to ask you. You need to know what is their break-even point. How fast will they get that investment money back? And last but not least, to overcome the fear, you need to go, here's the initial price, but the total cost of ownership is going to be this, Mr. Customer. And if you can get them to accept that number, you're more than halfway to closing that deal. And on that note, that is it for this Sales Influence podcast. Leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Let me know what you think. This one's a little more technical, a little visual. Try to imagine these numbers. But again, if you're talking to C-level people, decision makers, business owners, you need to know these numbers. Anyway, if you want more information on pricing, check out one of my courses on the Sales Velocity Academy, where I talk about pricing strategies and what metrics, numbers you need to know to be more persuasive. Also, I'll add to that, I have a course called Value-Centric Selling that helps you position value and walks you through ROI, break-even points, and total cost of ownership. And on that note, this is Victor Antonio signing off, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.